Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Age Better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman, and today my guest is Dr. Koffler. You recently gave a talk, which I really loved, entitled Stronger Aging, an Integrative Health Approach to Preventing Decline, which got a lot of media attention. And I invited you to come on the show to talk about your approach to successful aging, as you expressed it so perfectly in your lecture. So let's dive right in, starting with, what are the foundational principles of integrative health, and how do they differ from conventional medical approaches?
So first of all, it's a healing orientation. In other words, it acknowledges that intrinsic within us is the drive towards healing. It also appreciates the role of the mind and the spirit in the health of the body. So those three are intertwined. And while we separate out, we parse up the patient, we parse up people, and we have subspecialists and specialists. The reality of it is everything affects everything. So we appreciate the impact that the mind has on the body has on the mind, the spirit has on all of it. We really emphasize lifestyle. We believe that the majority of the issues that we see as people age can be directly related to the lifestyle choices they made year after year. And so we really work to educate people to understand how their choices are influencing how they feel. And then finally, actually, we also make use of the therapeutic relationship, which we feel that as physicians, our role is to educate and inspire. When we create a sort of safe environment for patients to really examine how they're approaching their lives, they have the opportunity to see it more clearly and make other choices, especially when they're educated as to what those choices are doing. And then lastly, we make use of all available evidence-based therapies. I do not have buy-in into any one system. I believe in the healing capacity of acupuncture and Ayurvedic medicine and massage and all kinds of other therapies that have very low invasiveness. In other words, they're rather kind to the body,
Mm-hmm.
but can have a very big impact on healing. So we're more apt to use those strategies and sort of save drugs and surgery in case everything else doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is integrative medicine the same as functional medicine?
Actually, the two are there's quite a bit of overlap in philosophy, but there are some distinctions, and I've melded the two. I've trained in both, so I've melded the two. But you can be seeing an integrative doc who does not know much about functional medicine, and likewise, functional medicine docs might not use some of the integrative strategies that we use in integrative health. So there is a distinction. Functional medicine very much believes in lifestyle, very much believes in environmental influences on health, and then also has a strong appreciation for the interplay of lifestyle, environment, and genes. We do a lot of sophisticated testing in functional medicine that isn't typically done by integrative docs.
Okay.
But many of us are beginning to blend both.
Was there a pivotal moment in your own career or in your own life that made you decide to take this path in medicine?
Oh, yes.
Oh, tell us about
I
it.
was I was actually a hospitalist doc, working in a teaching center in Denver, Colorado. And I was working in the intensive care unit one night at about 2 o'clock in the morning and reading through the patient's charts. This is in the days when we still had paper charts. That's how long ago it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat back and I realized he had been admitted 6 previous times for the exact same problem. And as I looked around the ICU that night, I realized that I knew half the patients from previous admissions. And a light bulb went off saying, what I'm doing is essentially futile. I am not changing anything. I am not creating health for these people at all. I'm simply stabilizing them, discharging them to the floor, getting them home, only to welcome them back again. And as I looked at that, I realized our tools were very insufficient for making a real difference in a person's life, and our focus was off. And so I began really questioning everything about medicine as a result. And I had the good fortune of working with a psychologist in the hospital who I used to send to see all my patients because I knew the patients always had a very rich story as to why they were in the hospital. And she was great at getting it and then sharing that information with me. And together we could start to do something to make a difference. And she suggested that I go to a conference, which I was pretty reluctant to go to, but ended up going to in the end. And there was a plenary speaker who began his talk with the following sentence that I never forgot. He said, "We do not have a healthcare system in this country, with a
Mhm.
disease management system in this country." And I thought, that's exactly what my frustration is. All we're
That's what you
doing
were
is
feeling
managing
that
disease.
night
We're
in the
not
hospital.
creating health. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that speaker was Andrew Weil. And at the
Oh,
end of his
okay.
talk,
Yeah.
I had no idea who he was. This was 1996. He was
Okay.
sort of reaching, sort of the peak of his popularity.
Hmm.
And at the end of his talk, he said, "We're starting a fellowship to retrain physicians in a new way of practicing medicine." And I had no idea what that meant, but I said, "I'm going." And I was fortunate to be the first class of physicians trained at the University of Arizona.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Wonderful story. And this was a pivotal point in your career and your life, and which caused you to go into this direction. And that's wonderful. In your lecture, you did mention a unique perspective on aging. How does all of this impact how we age? So, can you elaborate on how integrative health views the aging process differently from traditional medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I think that uh, tying back to what I said earlier, I think if you appreciate that the body is designed to heal, the body has the capacity to regenerate. It does it all the time. It particularly does it during deep stage sleep, by the way. But if you can appreciate that, then you can start thinking about, okay, what am I doing to support that? And what am I doing that's detracting from that? And it requires being a good observer and being honest with your habits and be willing to make small changes, which can over time reap huge rewards. So I think part of it has to do with just appreciating that you can be 102 years old and still be building muscle, which is having a big impact on brain health, on cardiovascular health, on immune
Mm-hmm.
health, on outlook, on mood, etc. So studies have shown that. So appreciating that no matter what your age is, you are regenerating, you are healing. And the choices that you make either support that or detract from that.
Right, right, right. And it is little changes. So you talk about and write about 7 body systems that integrative health doctors examined for disruptions.
Mhm.
So can you briefly describe what these systems are and their
Sure,
importance in healthy aging?
sure. So this is really more born out of, I think, a functional medicine lens. And that by focusing on these symptoms, you really improve organ function, energy, vitality, metabolism. So the organ systems are digestion and absorption, how well we break down our food, how well we absorb it, but also the integrity of the gut lining is all woven in there. And by the way, the gut includes the mouth. So it starts at the mouth and ends where it ends.
Hmm.
Sure. Um, as we age, there is an aging that's happening to immune cells that we can play a role in slowing down and improving upon. Our ability to generate energy, our hormonal system, our system of transport, and that includes not just blood vessels, which is very important, but lymphatics and the myofascial tissue of the body. So the fascia, which is a communication system, we now realize plays an important role in how we age and how we feel. Our ability to detoxify compounds, which is why I really think every doc that takes care of people 60 and older should be striving to reduce medications, not augment, because we're losing the ability to break down all those toxins. We've had a lifelong exposure of environmental toxins of all kinds. We don't need to add more to the system. And then finally, the movement system. So that includes joints, bones, and absolutely muscle. So if we attend to those 7 systems, we can really impact how well we age.
Okay, let's get back to the microbiome and the mouth, of course, the connection there. Thank you for pointing that out. It is a hot topic. I've had several episodes focusing with, microbiome experts focusing on the microbiome. And how does the gut microbiome influence how we age?
Yeah, so just a couple of things about the mouth. As women age and they lose estrogen, there's an impact on their gum health. There's
Yep.
also a reduction in saliva, which has an impact on tooth and gum health. So it makes, and that can alter the microbiome. Anything that alters the health of the tissue can alter the microbiome. So it makes women's care of their teeth and gums even more important. So I always have my postmenopausal women go for full cleanings at least 3 times a year, maybe even quarterly, and
That's
be flossing.
amazing. That's an amazing and wonderful tip.
Right. So then when we go down to the microbiome, which is largely the colon, where the majority of the bacteria live, we realize a number of things. First of all, anything that happens upstream from that is going to influence the bacteria that inhabit our gut. And they're key, your audience probably already knows, but they're key for vitamin absorption. They're key for vitamin and nutrient production. So particularly vitamin K is made by our microbiome. They're incredibly important for maintaining the integrity of the gut lining, for keeping invading marauders out. And they just have an extraordinary number of roles, so much so that it is probably the fastest growing area of research in medicine today is the microbiome. In the
Yep.
last few years, there's been about 10,000 papers a year coming out just on this topic, which is massive. And so you can sort of understand how somebody gets so focused because it's difficult to keep up with it all. Um,
True.
and
Yes, true.
yeah. So the microbiome, as we age, we typically make less acid and enzymes. We may have reduced motility. We have more exposures, and all of that can lead to a decrease in microbial diversity. And
Right.
it turns out that diversity is key to maintaining the health of the microbiome and therefore the health of the gut and therefore the health of our immune systems, our brains, our hearts, our hormonal system, our metabolism, our mood, etc. So everything's affecting everything. So as we lose diversity, we now know that certain bacterial strain losses are associated with the development of specific diseases, like inflammatory bowel disease, for
Hmm.
instance. So we're actually getting that refined that we can see what species can be associated with an increased tendency towards developing specific diseases.
And what can we do as we get older to maintain that diversity that we so need to age
Right.
successfully? What do we do?
At a macroscopic level, it's remembering that everything affects everything. So your lifestyle choices have a direct impact on your gut and your microbiome within your gut. So starting with nutrition, when you overfeed refined sugars, you are selecting for certain bacteria that will overgrow their bounds and compromise the health of other bacteria. When we use medications like Advil, ibuprofen, Motrin, and other medications that are prescribed, that can influence the health of the microbiome. When we don't have the motility, when we are not clearing out our bowels the way we should, that can influence. So being sure you're moving your bowels regularly, which is very easy to do with a combination of magnesium plus vitamin C or magnesium alone. So maintaining all of that. And then really understanding that what the bacteria enjoy feeding on is fiber. So having a diet that's rich in fiber, which really means you have a diet that's rich in vegetables, nuts and seeds, to some extent whole grains and fruits, will help nourish those bacteria. And eating fermented foods contributes, perhaps taking probiotics, especially if you've been on antibiotics, that may be of help.
Right.
All these are all ways that you can improve your microbiome. But bearing in mind, movement, minimizing stress. When we're stressed, it actually stresses our bacteria and it reduces blood flow to the gut, which makes it produce less of its protective membrane, which makes it more susceptible to injury and infection. So everything affects everything.
Everything affects everything. You mentioned in your talk and elsewhere that a small number of genes are responsible for lifespan. How significant is the impact of, well, we've already discussed the lifestyle choices on aging compared to genetic makeup, but really, clearly you think lifestyle is key and essential. For sure, agree completely. But there is still the genetic component, right?
There is, but honestly, it's really, I consider it to be minimal. I really consider that to be minimal because lifestyle influences the expression of those genes. So
Right.
you can carry those genes. And really, only 5% of genetically based diseases are penetrant, which means only 5% of diseases that are based in a genetic issue are going to actually show up in a person. That means 95% is up to the choices that you make. So I don't even care about, I'm not going to worry about that small number. Those are more infrequent diseases. I do see them, but those are less common.
Right.
We have a great deal of dominion over how we age.
I always like to give people hope if they've been living a less than ideal life to date, and maybe they're just turning in and say, oh, I've got to really take better control of my life and my health. Let me start. And they're hearing all these tips, and they might be wondering, is it too late? I feel it's never too late. Like you mentioned, starting to exercise, build up your muscle. We know this, that from all the studies, that you can start building muscle when you're 102 years old, when you're 80, when you're 90, when you're 60.
Right.
So what are your views on that? Is it ever too late?
Well, it goes back to what we said earlier. If you study, for those people who are waving the white flag, take a moment and look at some YouTube videos on cell physiology. What you are made up of is already working to heal you. It's repairing enzymes. It's repairing damaged DNA. At the microscopic level, you are healing. So you could start in the next moment after this podcast is over. The very next choice you make can actually create greater diversity in your microbiome. And we know that. Every time you eat a meal, you're affecting the microbiome. So you're either affecting it positively or negatively. And if you get it 80% right, we have the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard that plenty of times. Get it 80% right. The other 20%, let it go. It's fine. It's not going to influence in the long run. So really, every single time you begin again and again and again, and that's what life is. You're beginning again every day.
Yes.
You can make a huge impact. It all adds up. And by the way, studies show that all the time. Lifelong smokers will begin to heal their lungs the moment they stop smoking. That's a dense toxin that's usually repeated many times in a day. And still the lungs will clear that out. I think these things get easier when you have a quality of appreciation for this thing that we're in that is working so hard to get you through life.
Mm-hmm.
And being a little kinder to it, understanding what it's saying when it gives symptoms. When it gives symptoms off, it's telling you the state that it's in. Your job is to interpret that and assuage it in whatever way it needs to. So in other words, I think that people have a fight going on with their bodies, or frustrated, or don't want to give it attention, when in reality it's sort of a wise machine that we're just learning how to operate better and better and better. So
Yeah.
having compassion, I think, for yourself is
Yes.
important.
It's a form of self-love.
Exactly.
It really is. And probably the most important thing you can do is have some more compassion for this thing that we're in.
Yes.
Yes, I love that you called it that. So for our listeners and viewers who are very interested in, adopting this lifestyle, which is a better lifestyle for sure, what are some of your best tips to just get them started?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, pick something and integrate it in as a way of being. So, whatever resonates the most at this particular moment. So maybe it's move more. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? When you go to the grocery store, pick a further parking spot. Don't circle around trying to find the closest parking spot.
Right.
When you see a set of, when you're heading up somewhere on an escalator, walk those steps instead of just passively letting it bring you to your destination. So integrate movement, because if we look at the healthiest societies in the world, they have natural movement. They're literally moving about every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're not going to the gym, and they're not lifting weights, and they're not running marathons. They are weaving movement in every day, and they're living really cognitively intact and physically robustly into their 100s. So that's possible for all of us. So I think increasing natural movement. Take a walk after a meal. That has a massive impact on blood sugar levels and insulin and so forth, which helps your metabolism so that as you age, that's not continuing to slow. So natural movement.
They've used, different terms to try to get people more focused on this movement, like very frequent movement throughout the day, exercise snacks,
Oh,
micro
that's great.
dosing on exercise, whatever you want to call it, everyone. But
Right.
it is like what you were saying, the blue zones populations around the world that Dan Buettner follows, they move throughout the day. And you're right, they're living well into their 80s, 90s, 100s. Yeah. So
Yes.
what's the next one?
I would say get enough protein,
Mm-hmm.
because as we age, we make less acid, and acid is really important in breaking down protein. And protein is critical in the regeneration of bone, of muscle, of all of our tissues. So adequate protein, which more or less is probably about a gram per kilogram, more
Mm-hmm.
or less. It's really person dependent on what they're working on, but that's something to shoot for. And that's not like, for me, that's very difficult. I have to really concentrate on my protein intake. Um, there's so much more we could say about food, because I really do think that probably 85% of your health is predicated on how you nourish your cells. But
Mm.
the other piece is recognize that when you ingest refined sugars, you overwhelm the cell, and in particular the mitochondria, and you make the mitochondria, which are the energy generating units of your cell. It's what drives the cell to do its work day by day and gives energy throughout the system. They become dysfunctional. We were not designed to take in refined carbs, but just a bit, just a tiny bit, which is why it's at the very top of the food pyramid, but
Right.
like a tiny bit of it. And that's not easy in a society that's awash in sugar. So I'd say those two things are really important.
Yeah.
Um, sleep, safeguarding your sleep. We were, in ancient times, we went to bed when it was dark and we got up when it became light again.
Right.
Previous generations slept 10 hours a day. We are so short shrifting our sleep.
So, you advocate for a plant-based diet. Are you personally like vegan or vegetarian?
I'm not. Well, let me just say, left to my own devices, I would be vegetarian because I never liked meat.
Mhm.
I just never liked eating animals. Since I'm a kid, I
Yeah.
was a tough
Hmm.
eater that way.
Yep. Totally
However,
get that.
I am very clear that we're designed to be omnivores. So, with all due respect to my vegan friends and my vegetarian friends, and for the people who ascribe to that, and I appreciate that we don't necessarily have, well, we clearly do not have a very humane of feeding large numbers of people. However, if you just look at our biology and you look at our teeth and you look at the length of our gut, it is very clear we're designed to be omnivores. We're designed to eat both plant and animal. Of that, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
Then there's personal preference. And personally, I just do way better with plants. However, I can't meet my protein needs without incorporating some animal protein. And I have the good fortune of being married to a chef. So whatever he puts in front of me, I eat.
That's
I don't argue with
wonderful.
him, but we do. The dominant thing in our diet is plants,
Yes.
and then really good quality protein is added.
Yeah, and you do reference Michael. I'm holding up my old battered
Yes,
copy of it. Michael Pollan's book, "Food Rules: An
yes,
Eater's Manual." It's this little book. I mean, if guys who are listening and watching, if you haven't yet read this book, it is just brilliant. It's so simple. And what
yes.
is the most famous line from this, Dr. Koffler? It's eat food, mostly plants,
Yeah, eat
if I'm not
food, not too
mistaken.
much, mostly plants.
Not
Yeah,
too much, but
yes,
exactly right. And that's so true. Such a
yeah,
simple rule. And I agree with you. Personally, I also have I want to make sure I get enough protein. So I do eat animal protein, but really very little. It is
yeah,
mostly plant-based for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and I would say it's always been like that for like the last I don't know, 20 years or so, for sure.
yeah.
So thank you for those dietary changes. And what do you think are some of the biggest challenges you face in promoting integrative health, especially in the context of aging? Like, you know, are you pushing a big rock up a hill, a boulder up a hill, or or do you think that more and more people, including the medical community, by the way,
Yeah,
are
yeah,
embracing this way of thinking and living?
yeah, that's such a great question. Well, um, if I talk to the public, it is not pushing a rock up a hill, a boulder up a hill. Um, in systems, especially those dependent on the insurance industry,
Mm-hmm.
it is pushing a massive boulder up a hill because they're not focused on any one person. It is not personalized medicine. And medicine has to be, by definition, medicine must be personalized. However, the insurance industry is not about personalizing care for anyone.
Right.
And so we are faced all the time with denials, simple things. When I want to check certain blood tests, they don't feel it's justified because they're not aligned around prevention. And they're not quick adopters of new technology or new studies or new realizations through studies. So I think the insurance industry is a huge impediment. I think that there are some insurance companies that are making some small gestures of changes, but I think there has to be a complete shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
I also think the way we train medical students, as I mentioned before, we train them in hospitals. We don't train them in outpatient centers. We don't train them in gyms. We don't train them out in the community enough because the overwhelming majority of us do not spend time in hospitals. Most of us have chronic degenerative issues, or if we develop them, they're chronic low grade issues that don't buy us a ticket necessarily until we're quite ill into the hospital.
Right.
And we should be producing doctors who can look at someone early and say, I'm concerned for this in the long run. Beyond the cholesterol thing, which I still don't feel like we're handling properly, really thinking in terms of a careful family history, a careful lifestyle assessment, very in-depth labs, and the ability to sit down with somebody to take the time to educate them and teach them, this is what I see in the future, and this is how you can prevent that. So what would you like to do? What do you feel you can do?
Right.
So the system's not set up for it. The typical primary care doc has no more than 15 minutes per patient. You can't address these issues. So I feel like the systems that we have in place do not help us in integrative health. The good news is many people realize this and are building things outside of traditional healthcare model because they want health. They don't just want, to address disease. They want to prevent what their parents had. And they're
Right.
willing to do the work to do it. They're
Yeah.
willing to make the investment to do it. So I think that's a big piece of it. And then I think our food system certainly does not help. Our food system, you have to be so careful when you shop to get food that's not tainted with toxins and pesticides and so forth, to not buy things mostly in the center of the grocery store that are packaged so brilliantly and marketed so cleverly. You just have to buy food. Like if you can't recognize where this grows or lives, it doesn't belong in your system, no matter how enticing they make it. And by the way, they do such an incredible job crafting food to maximize its impact on you. It's genius, but it's a form of psychological warfare, I think.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make it easy for any of us. We really have to be tough when we go out there
Yes.
to stores.
But I do think making change is challenging. So I think working with health coaches, which gives access to everyone, you can get online with a health coach, and they, in a very non-judgmental way, can help you work towards your goals. Or family members or friends, starting a walking group, one of the things that we haven't addressed is the critical importance as we age of relationships. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm. I want to go back to something that you said a little while ago about cholesterol. And you said that we are not handling, I'm paraphrasing you, sorry, we're not handling this well. Tell us what you mean.
Well, I mean, rates of heart disease have done nothing but increase.
Yeah.
We have made very little impact on cardiovascular disease, um, despite widespread use of statins. I think the issue that people don't realize is it's probably sugar and insulin spikes that do more damage to our blood vessel linings than anything else. So we've been very focused on cholesterol because we have a easy prescription to write. And I'm not saying that statins are not appropriate, because they are, but we think we've done our job if we've written out a statin prescription, and that nothing could be farther from the truth. Statins are very interesting medications. They're both an anti-inflammatory and can lower cholesterol, but it can come at a cost, including, especially in women, an increased risk for diabetes. It also plays a role in how we generate energy. So when people get muscle aches, that is a manifestation of a significant disruption of energy production in the body. So again, I'm not against statins. However, we're indiscriminately using it, and we're calling it a day once we've written that prescription for patients. What we really need to concentrate on is getting blood sugar levels very stable so that you don't see insulin spikes, so that doesn't have a negative impact on the liver's production of cholesterol, especially the more sticky, violent, aggressive forms of cholesterol. Keeping blood pressure low so there's no injury to the blood vessel wall to begin with. And that's done best probably through exercise and stress modification, like you see. Not only when you breathe, like you were describing before, you're slowing your heart rate, but if I did a blood pressure at the same time, you're lowering your blood pressure.
Yes.
So you're making your blood vessels much more fluid and flexible and at ease, as opposed to the tension that develops over time with stress. Yeah. I just want to make a mention, you said that piece again about breathing.
Mm-hmm.
There was a cardiologist, I think he was out of University of Illinois several years ago, who also discovered the value of breathing in lowering blood pressure. And he designed a tool called Respirit. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And it basically, you just match your breathing to the movement of these LED lights. And he showed through several scientific studies that it resulted in a sustained lowering of blood pressure. So this
Wow.
ancient technique of slowing down your breath and being aware of your breathing can have profound physiologic changes, and it's been now proven.
That's fascinating, and I don't know about that, but I would like to get that link and I will add it into the show notes so everyone who's interested, who's listening, watching, can check that out, including me. So thank you for that. So, okay, so I think we kind of covered how you see the whole healthcare industry evolving. You will continue to push that boulder up that hill, clearly, in your own way. And we're hopeful that as time goes on, that more physicians will move in your direction, insurance companies will get on board, and of course, that people will see the benefit in changing their lives, in some cases in very small ways, but sustainable ways. And that's the thing, too. As I often like to say, these can't be one-offs. Like, you can't say, well, I'm going to go take that walk after dinner for 30 minutes to help lower my blood sugar level, and then you don't do it again for a week. It's like, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We are talking about developing healthy habits. And, you said something earlier, and I forget the term you used, but basically, they start with something, like take movement, and that can become your foundational habit. And that's what happened with me. Like, this all happened with me, or for me, when I turned 50, went through menopause, was starting to, estrogen levels were at the bottom, and all kinds of changes were taking place. I was gaining a little weight, feeling just like really grumpy, lumpy, dumpy about the whole thing. And then I took action and I started running. So my foundational habit became walking, and then which turned into running, and I do the run walk. And then from there, other habits followed. And so,
Exactly.
We never want people to get overwhelmed where they then do nothing and they put the blanket over their heads, right?
Your definition of yourself began to change through the actions that you took.
Yes.
And they started out pretty small. I mean, when we're talking a 10-minute walk after dinner,
Yes.
you're literally walking out the door for 5 minutes and turning around and walking back. Most of us can manage that, right?
Yes.
So, and you just see, once you start doing that and you notice, oh, I do feel a little better. My digestion is a little bit better. I slept a little bit better. That itself is the encouragement to continue.
Dr. Koffler, this was an amazing conversation. I am so grateful that you were on the show sharing your knowledge. And before we let you go, can you give us your 3 or however many you like, takeaways, like your best takeaways you really want to make sure the Age Better audience remembers from our talk today?
All right. So first and foremost, begin to move. And if you're already moving, don't be afraid to build strength. So what that means is using excellent form. And if you need a physical therapist to ensure that you have great form, that is very available. You no longer need a prescription in order to go to physical therapist from your physician anymore. You can go straight to a physical therapist. And that's really important as we age, because we want to make sure you're holding yourself correctly. Your core is engaged as you move weight. But seek to build muscle.
Yes.
We are losing muscle mass as we age. One of the most important biomarkers of healthy aging is how much muscle we are taking with us as we age. So we should all be invested in building muscle. When it comes to food, again, what Michael Pollan says, eat real food, not too much. There's a Japanese saying, hara hachi bu. It means eat until you're 80% full.
Mm-hmm.
There are like at least a dozen hormones and neurotransmitters that are communicating between the fat, the gut, and the brain to tell us that we're satiated. The moment you feel that, you're done. Listen to the wisdom of your body and put your fork down, give it a rest. There's another meal coming. So I think honoring that wisdom of your body to tell you when you've had enough to eat and don't push past it, and that's when you start upsetting cellular function. Do the best you can to ensure restorative sleep. That means it's restorative sleep when you wake up in the morning and you feel like, oh wow, I had a great night's sleep. I love the Apple Watch. We often tell people to get an Aura ring, which I think is also really quite good at helping us see the quality of our sleep. And if you're not getting good quality sleep, then it's time to see someone who can help you with that.
Yes.
And I think we touched on it a bit, but Vivek Murthy, who's our Surgeon General, really has done a beautiful job highlighting the importance of relationships, like real relationships, not Snapchat, texting relationships, but real conversations, real extensions towards people. And that includes altruism, which has been shown to improve quality of life as we age. It's not easy if you are not surrounded by family and friends as you get older to create those relationships. But there's such phenomenal need in every one of our communities, whether it's in homeless shelters or in childcare or in elder care or in environmental issues, or the list goes on and on. Get involved and create your community. We are like my dog who hates when we leave him outside for 1 second longer than he has to pee. We are pack animals. We do best in a pack, right? It used to be punishment to excise you outside of the tribe. So granted, it's a moment of vulnerability, but it's worth it to create relationships that are sustaining to you and to the other person. That has a huge impact on healthy aging.
It really does. Thank you so much for those tips. I hope everyone listening and watching will really take those to heart and actually start to use them starting today. Thank you so much, Dr. Koffler, and I hope you'll come back.